Happy Easter from Live, Learn, and Lead. Today we're going to read The Little Mailman of Bayberry Lane. It was a lovely, clear autumn morning in Bayberry Lane. The trees were bright yellow and red, the thistles were sparkling with dew, and there was that good bayberry smell coming from the bushes on either side of the lane. Even though it was very early, Mrs. Goose had wandered far up the lane picking bayberries. She was going to make bayberry candles that day. Besides, she always liked to be the first one to welcome the little mailman, for he always had the latest gossip. She peered up the lane to see if he was in sight. Mrs. Duck was sweeping the yellow leaves off her walk. She too kept going out to her mailbox and looking for the lane. I do hope there's a letter from my sister, she thought. Mr. Turtle was sitting on his front step in the warm sunshine. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't asleep. He was listening for the cheery whistle of the little mailman. I wonder if he'll bring my new tulip catalog, he thought. But he didn't go out to the gate and look up the lane. Shucks, he said. What's the hurry anyhow? Around the bend in the lane was Miss Pig's house. Miss Pig was waiting by her mailbox, even though she never received any letters. Every morning she hoped for one, but every morning the little mailman passed her by. Then from the lane came the little mailman chatter. Ah, Mrs. Goose, you're out early this morning. Here's your mail. Have you heard the robins are going south for the winter? And Mrs. Duck, a yellow letter for you today. Yellow means good news, you know. He put a tulip catalog in Mr. Turtle's mailbox and called, Hi, Mr. Turtle, here are your tulips for you that won't talk back, ha ha ha. And quickly as he had come, he was around the bend in the lane. There he slowed to a walk, and his cheerful seemed to leave him. He didn't like to go to Miss Pig's house. He couldn't bear the look of disappointment on her face every morning. The little mailman was the only one who guessed how sad and lonely Mrs. Pig was, and there she was standing by her mailbox waiting for him. The little mailman put on a bright smile and called, Good morning, Miss Pig. Say, do I smell apple tarts this morning? I have one here for you, said Miss Pig. Today's my baking day, you know. He bit into the tart. Miss Pig, you're the very best cook in Bayberry Lane. Miss Pig blushed and looked very pleased. And with a cheery thank you, the little mailman bounded off down the lane. He thought, I wonder why Miss Pig never gets any letters. Maybe it's because she never writes any herself. I wondered why she doesn't have any friends. Maybe it's because she never goes out anywhere to make friends. Maybe she's shy, afraid to try. Somebody ought to get her started. I wish I could think of some way to help her. He was still munching on the apple tart. He said, today is Friday. I wonder what she'll bake next Friday. Then he had a wonderful idea. Wonderful, he shouted, and he couldn't wait to get home to start working on it. The little mailman's house was under a stone wall, so it was always dark inside his room. Even in the middle of the day, he lighted one of Mrs. Goose's bayberry candles and sat down at his table to write. He wrote, You were invited to a surprise party for Mrs. Pig next Friday afternoon at 3. Then he popped the invitations into a pink envelope for Mr. and Mrs. Goose, then another for the ducks, and one for Mr. Turtle. The next morning, after the little mailman had passed through Bayberry Lane, all was excitement. Everyone but Miss Pig had received a pink invitation. There hadn't been a party in the lane for a long time. Mrs. Goose was ironing her party sash. Mrs. Duck was sticking her new feathers in her party hat, and Mr. Turtle was shaking mothballs out of the pocket of his party jacket. But Mrs. Pig was still sad and lonesome as she went about her housework. On Friday, she did her baking as usual. This time she made apple tarts and little lemon cakes, all covered with hickory nuts. She set them on the windowsill to cool and went out to work in the garden. At 3 o'clock, she was just picking a bouquet of daffodils when she heard "Surprise! Surprise!" and popped up 6 heads from her garden wall. She dropped the flowers and dropped the scissors and stood with her mouth wide open. She could hardly believe her eyes. Then she remembered her manners and said, "Oh, do I come in? Won't you?" They all scrambled over the stone wall, all except Mr. Turtle, who went around and through the gate. Mrs. Goose said, "I've brought you one of my handmade bayberry candles. They smell so good when they are burning." Mrs. Duck said, "I've brought you a feather duster I made myself." The little mailman had brought her a basket of hickory nuts, and just then Mr. Turtle arrived and presented her with one of his best tulip bulbs. It was the happiest afternoon of Miss Pig's life, and everyone had a wonderful time at the party. They played croquet on the lawn. Miss Pig brewed a big pot of tea and served her apple tarts and lemon cakes. The party didn't end until dark. The following day, the little mailman chatted with everyone as usual, all down Bayberry Lane. As he came to Miss Pig's house, he whistled merry tune, for in his mailbag were 6 little letters for Miss Pig. Miss Pig was so excited that she read them right where she stood. Miss Pig was never so sad and lonely after that. There were so many visitors to be made, so many parties, and so many letters to be answered. And Miss Pig knew that she owed all her newfound happiness to her very best friend, the little mailman of Bayberry Lane. Thank you guys for listening to us today. We enjoyed reading this little book. We just want to wish you guys a happy Easter and have a great time with your families. Bye.